All right, so y'all go ahead and do the factoring and the math knowledge question for today. Pause the video, and then once everyone is finished, you can unpause the video and I'll go over the correct answers. So for the factoring, we're going to do remove, replace, reduce. So we're going to remove the 16, and we'll have x squared plus 8x plus 16. When we replace and factor, we'll have 16x plus 4 times 16x plus 4. And then both of those will divide by 4. So we'll have 4x plus 1 times 4x plus 1, which you can also write as 4x plus 1 squared. For the math knowledge question, x-intercepts are where it crosses the x-axis. So these are all positive numbers. So we'll go over here. And it's going to be some number and then 0. Because we're not going up. We want to be on the x-axis. So we can plug in a 0 here for our y value. So 0 squared is 0. And if you divide by 36, that's still 0. So this whole term basically goes away. And then if you cross multiply, you'll have x squared equals 64. And then if you take the square root of both sides, x equals positive or negative 8. And so D is the only one they give you, 8, 0. But another x-intercept would be negative 8, 0. Okay, so that's how that works. We're looking at lesson 50 today. We're going to look at trig equations. So hopefully after this lesson, you'll understand how these equations work. Before we do an example, we want to look at this notation. It's telling us that our angle theta is either greater than or equal to 0, but less than 360 degrees. So those are going to be our answers here. Basically, one unit circle around. So we want to solve sine of theta equals 1 over square root of 2, given that theta is is greater than or equal to 0, but less than 360. So what angles give us 1 over square root of 2? Think about your unit circle. In the first quadrant, sine is positive, and that's going to be a 45-degree angle. And then the other place that sine is positive is in the second quadrant. And so the related angle to 45 degrees is 135 degrees. So that would be your theta. 45 degrees and 135 would both work. Now, when we were doing problems like this, we would only be getting 45 degrees. And that's because this isn't an equation. It was just saying, what does this equal? So whenever you have sine inverse, you're only going to have one option. But whenever you have an actual equation, you put all of them that would possibly work. And they give you a range here because we don't want to go past one complete circle. Once we've done one circle around, we want to stop. If they didn't give you this, then technically you would have to just keep adding 360 to these because you would have infinitely many options. Okay, so let's look at another example. So this one isn't set up like the last one. So we need to start off by setting it up so that it's either sine, cosine, tangent, secant, cosecant, cotangent equals something. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract the 2. And then I'm going to divide by square root of 3. Now from here, we know that secant is related to cosine. The reciprocal of secant is cosine. So if I take the reciprocal of secant, I'm going to have cosine. And then I can just take the reciprocal of this right side, which is going to be negative square root of 3 over 2. So we don't want to leave it here because we're not as familiar with our secants. So take the reciprocal of both sides of your equation, just flip this one and flip that one, and that puts it in terms of cosine, which you're a lot more familiar with. All right, so where does cosine equal square root of 3 over 2? That's going to be a 30-degree angle, but this one is negative. So cosine is negative in the second and third quadrants. So a 30-degree angle in the second quadrant would be 150 degrees, and then a 30-degree angle in the third quadrant would be 210 degrees. So that would be your answer for this one. Okay, so if you have sine, cosine tangent equal to a positive number or a negative number, usually you're going to have two options, two answers. Not always, especially if it's sine or cosine and it equals positive or negative 1. But if it's just sine, cosine, tangent, and they equal a number, typically you're going to be having two answers for these. Okay, so we're going to look at one more. So we need to start off by getting cosecant by itself. So I'm going to start by subtracting the 3 square roots of 2. And then dividing by 3. Which would just make negative square root of 2. And then I don't know cosecant very well, but I know that's the reciprocal of sine. And then the reciprocal of square root of 2 would be 1 over square root of 2. And so where does sine equal 1 over square root of 2? Well, that's at a 45-degree angle, but this one is negative. So sine is negative in the 3rd quadrant and the 4th quadrant. So a 45-degree angle in the 3rd quadrant would be 225, and a 45-degree angle in the 4th quadrant would be 315. And so that would be your answer for that one. Okay, so again, you have to know your unit circle to be able to deal with these. If you're not comfortable with your unit circle, you really need to continue studying that. That's going to make these a lot quicker for you. Okay, so your homework tonight, you get to omit number 10 and 28. So make sure to do the other one so we can go over any questions you have tomorrow.